Welcome to i-TUTOR IAS Academy Biology NCERT series. Today we will be discussing part 2 of chapter 14 Ecology. We will be starting with ecological pyramids. You must be familiar with the shape of a pyramid. It is broad near the base and it narrows as we at the it narrows at the top. So this is the shape of a pyramid. It's broad near the base and it narrows near the apex. One gets a similar shape when you express the food or energy relationship between organisms at different topic levels. Thus, relation is expressed in terms of number, biomass or energy. The base of each pyramid represents the producers or the first topic level, while the base is represented by producers, the base area is represented by the producers, while the apex area is represented by the tertiary or the top level consumers. The three ecological pyramids that are usually studied are pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass and pyramid of energy. We will see in detail with details about these three. Pyramid of number in a grassland ecosystem. Only top 3 carnivores are supported in an ecosystem based on the production of nearly 6 million plants. So we can see that as we move up the tropic levels, the number decreases rapidly. So the primary consumers, it is around a very huge number and it drastically decreases when we move to the primary consumers. Then it further declines, the number further declines when we move to the secondary consumer, and it becomes a very small number when it comes to the top level carnivores, the top level of the tropic level. Moving on, we'll see pyramid of biomass. Pyramid of biomass also shows sharp decrease in biomass at higher tropic levels. So the primary producers make up a huge weight. It's measured in dry weight, that is kilogram per meter square. So the pyramid of biomass, the biomass weight is very high when it comes to the primary producers. Then it decreases as we move up the tropic levels. So as we move to the primary consumer, the dry weight decreases to a small amount. It further declines to the secondary consumers, and then to the tertiary consumer, the value becomes a very small amount. Then we see inverted pyramid of biomass. Standing crop of phytoplankton support a large standing crop of zooplankton. So when we measure the standing crop of phytoplankton, this is primary producers. In an aquatic ecosystem, the primary producer is a phytoplankton. So phytoplankton make up the primary producers. It has only it doesn't have that much biomass compared to the zooplankton that is support. So the standing crop of the biomass of phytoplankton is less than the biomass of the zooplankton in an aquatic ecosystem. So that's why this pyramid is an inverted pyramid. So we usually see a pyramid like this. So this shape is an inverted pyramid. So this is a inverted pyramid of biomass. It's seen, this example is a aquatic ecosystem where the zooplankton biomass species supports large biomass of zooplankton. The phytoplankton small biomass of phytoplankton supports large biomass of zooplankton. Moving on. So an ideal pyramid of energy. This is an ideal pyramid of energy. Observe the primary producers convert only 1% of the energy in the sunlight available to them as into the net primary productivity. So this is the primary productivity or primary producers. It takes up only 1% of the sunlight and only 10% is transferred to the next tropic level. So the energy is the least at the topmost tropic level. Any calculations of energy content, biomass or number has to include all organisms at that topic level. No generalization we make will be true if we take only few individuals at any topic levels into account. So it will be true only when we take all organism in that topic level into account. But if we take only very few, then we will not get the correct data. Also, a given organism may occupy more than one tropic level simultaneously. So one must remember that the tropic level represents a functional level, not a species as such. A given species may occupy more than one tropic level in the same ecosystem at the same time. For example, a sparrow is a primary consumer when it eats seeds, fruits, peas, etc. and it's a secondary consumer when it eats insects and worms. So a same organism can occupy two or more tropic levels. Example is a sparrow. When it eats the fruits and seeds, then it is a primary consumer, while when it eats the worms and insects, it becomes a secondary consumer. So it occupies two tropic levels. In most ecosystems, all the pyramids of number, of energy and biomass are upright. So usually these pyramid of number, pyramid of energy and pyramid of biomass are upright. That is, the producer are more in number and biomass, than the herbivores, and herbivores are more in number and biomass than carnivores. Also, the energy at lower tropic levels is always more than at the higher tropic levels. So this is what we have seen in these three pyramids. So this is pyramid of number, which is upright. Then this is pyramid of biomass, and this is an inverted pyramid of biomass, and this is a pyramid of energy, which is always upright. There are some exception to this generalization. If you were to count the number of insects feeding on a big tree, what kind of pyramid would you get? Just think. So when you count the number of insects that is feeding on a big tree, then it will be an inverted pyramid, because there is only one tree, and that one tree is feeding so many insects present in the that is living on the tree. So we'll get the inverted pyramid. Now add an estimate of number of small birds depending on the insects, also the number of larger birds eating the smaller. The pyramid of biomass in sea is also generally inverted because the biomass of fishes is far exceeding that of the biomass of phytoplankton. However, there are certain limitations of ecological pyramids, such as it does not take into account the same species belonging to two or more tropic levels. It assumes a simple food chain, something that almost never exists in nature. It does not accommodate a food web. Moreover, saprophytes are not given any place in the ecological pyramids, even though they play a vital role. So, though it is very good in expressing and understanding a general trend, it's not very accurate, because it doesn't take into account when a species is present in two or more tropic levels, and it assumes only a food chain. It doesn't take into account a food web, which is actually present in the nature. And another thing is, saprophytes doesn't have any place in the ecological pyramids. Moving on, ecological succession. So you have already learned in your previous chapter, organism and population, that the characteristics of population and community, and also their response to environment, and how such responses vary from individual response. So let us examine another aspect of community response to environment over time. An important characteristic of all communities is that composition and structure constantly change in response to the changing environmental conditions. So all communities have an important characteristic, that is their composition and their structure. Their structure constantly change with the changing environment. This change is orderly and sequential, parallel with the changes in the physical environment. So it doesn't happen in a random manner, it is orderly and sequential. It happens in an order and sequence, and it is parallel to the changes. It is parallel to the changes of the physical environment. These changes lead finally to a community that is in equilibrium with the environment, and that is known as the climax community. So what is these are all important key terms which has to be kept in mind, and its definition is also very important. So first we have seen the community response to environmental changes. It is orderly and sequential, and it is parallel to the changes in the physical environment, and this changes lead to a community that is in equilibrium with the environment, and that community is known as a climax community. The gradual and fair predictable changes in species composition of an area is known as ecological succession, and this change, the gradual and the predictable change of the species to the environmental changes is known as ecological succession. So these are two important definitions. What is an ecological succession and what is a climax community? During succession, such species colonize in area and their populations become more numerous, whereas populations of other species decline and even disappear. The entire sequence of community that successively change in a given area are called series. So, the entire sequence of community that successively change in a given area is known as series. The individual transitional communities are termed as seral stages or seral communities. In the successive seral stages, there is a change in the diversity of organism, increase in the number of species and organism, as well as the increase in the total biomass. Succession is hence a process that starts with no living organism are there, and these could be in areas where no living organism ever existed, say a bare rock, or in areas that somehow lost all of its existing organism that was there before. The former is known as primary succession and the latter is known as secondary succession. So these two are another two important key terms, primary and secondary succession. So what is a primary succession? Primary succession take place in an area where no organism ever existed before. An example is a bare rock or a newly cooled lava surface which has become a rock. And the succession will take place in the area where the organism existed before and it was destroyed due to some reason. Then that succession is known as secondary succession. Examples of areas where primary succession occurs is a newly cooled lava, a bare rock, a newly created pond or reservoir. So these are all examples of areas where the primary succession will take place. Primary succession is the succession that will take place in an area where no organism existed before. The establishment of new biotic community is generally slow. Before a biotic community of diverse organisms can become established, there must be soil. So in case of newly cooled lava or bare rock and all, the soil will not be there. It's a hard rock surface. So for the biotic community to come and live or to be present, first condition is that there must be soil. So depending mostly on climate, it takes natural process several hundred years to several thousand years to produce fertile soil on bare rock. So it can take from several hundred to thousand years for a fertile soil to produce in a bare rock. Now, secondary succession begins in area where natural biotic communities have been destroyed by some process. For example, such as its abandoned land or burnt or cut forest, land that have been flooded, etc. Since some soil or sediments are already present, the succession become faster than primary succession. So secondary succession, it's like the abandoned land or farm or the burned or cut forest due to like various reasons, like if the forest fire happens in many of the areas. So after the forest fire, all the biotic communities will be lost, but the soil is already present in that area. So the succession is faster than primary succession. So always remember, secondary succession secondary succession is always secondary is always faster than primary. Secondary is always faster than primary. Moving on. Description of ecological succession usually focuses on changes in a vegetation. However, these vegetational changes in turn affect food and shelter of various types of organisms. Thus, as succession proceeds, the number and types of animals and decomposers also change. So, the description of ecological succession, it focuses on the changes in vegetation. However, these vegetational changes in turn affects the animals, because we have seen in the previous session that the plants are the primary producers and all other animals will depend on the plants. At any time during primary or secondary succession, natural or human induced disturbances happens, then it can convert the previous seral stage of succession into an earlier stage. Also, such disturbances create new conditions that encourage some species and discourage or eliminate other species. So we have seen that the succession is a long process, and if some human or natural, like human induced or natural, if some disturbances happens in between, then it will return to the previous seral stage of succession, to the earlier stage. And in case that disturbance happen, some species will have more growth, and it will discourage or eliminate the growth of other species. Now let's see succession of plants. Based on the nature of habitat, whether it is water or wet areas or it is very dry areas, the succession of plants is called hydrarch or serarch respectively. Hydrarch succession takes place in wetter areas, and the successional series progress from hydric to mesic conditions. Against this, the serarch succession takes place in dry areas, and the series progress from seric to mesic conditions. Hence, both hydric and serarch succession lead to mesic or medium water conditions, which is neither too dry like seric or not too wet like hydric. So, based on the nature of habitat, the succession of plants can be divided into two. One is succession in plants can be divided into two. One is hydrarch, and other is serarch. Sorry for the bad handwriting. Okay. Hydrarch and serarch. So what is the definition of hydrarch? Hydrarch and serarch. Definition of hydrarch is that the succession takes place in wetter areas and the successional series proceeds from hydric to mesic condition. And in case of serarch succession, the succession takes place from serarch or dry conditions to mesic conditions. So in both the cases, be it hydrarch succession or serarch succession, in both cases the final output or the final community is or final habitat will be a mesic condition, that is the medium water conditions. Moving on, the species that invade a bare area is known as pioneer species. What is a pioneer species? Pioneer species is that species which invade a bare area, like a newly cooled lava or a bare rock or a new created pond, etc. In primary succession on rocks, these are usually lichens, which are able to secrete acids to dissolve rock, helping in weathering and soil formation. These later pave way to some small plants like bryophytes, which are able to take hold in the small amount of soil. They are with time succeeded by bigger plants, and after several more stages, a stable climax forest community is formed. The climax forest community that is formed will remain stable as long as the environment remain unchanged. With time, the xerophytic habitat gets converted to mesophytic habitat. So, in case of primary succession, we have seen the succession happens in a bare area where there was no vegetation before. And the species that invade the bare area first is known as pioneer species. Most cases in primary succession, it is lichens. Lichens are the species to invade mostly. It's an example of pioneer species. So these lichens, it will secrete acids and it will dissolve rocks and it will help in weathering of the rock and soil formation. And when some soil is formed, small plants like bryophytes will come and it will again act and it will lead to more soil formation with time. Then bigger plants will come and several stages will pass and more species will be added, and in the end we will get a stable forest community. And this stable forest community will remain stable as long as the environment remain unchanged. And with time, the xerophytic bare rock area will be converted into a mesophytic condition. In primary succession in water, the pioneer species are small phytoplankton. So phytoplankton are the pioneer species in water. So we know that what are phytoplankton, we have seen this before. Yes, the phytoplankton is a producer in the aquatic ecosystem. They are replaced with time by free floating angiosperms. They are then rooted by hydrophytes, sedges, grasses, and finally the trees. The climax again would be a forest. With time, the water body is converted into land. So, in secondary succession, the species that invade depend on conditions of soil, availability of water, the environment, and as also seeds or other propagates present in the soil. Since soil is already there, the rate of succession is much faster and hence climax is also reached more quickly. So in secondary succession, the species invasion depends on the following condition. One is the soil, then availability of water, then the environmental conditions. And since the soil is already present, the rate of succession is much faster compared to the primary succession. And the climax community is also reached quickly. So these are the factors which makes secondary and primary succession different. What is more important to understand is that succession, particularly the primary succession, is very slow process, taking maybe thousands of years for the climax community or the climax condition to reach. Another important fact is to understand that all succession, whether taking place in water or land, will lead to similar climax communities. That is the Messi condition. So from extreme conditions to moderate conditions will be the final product of this succession. So this is a diagrammatic representation of a primary succession in water. So first the phytoplanktons will come, then some submerged plant stages will come. This will be followed by submerged free floating plant stage. This will be followed by reed swamp stage, which is again followed by marsh meadow stage, then a scrub stage, and it will finally lead to forest, stable forest community. This is the climax community. So phytoplankton, submerged plant stage, and over time it will lead to a climax community. And this will remain stable as long as there is no environmental disruption that is happening. Moving on, the next topic is nutrient cycle. You have already seen in your previous classes that organisms need constant supply of nutrients to grow, to reproduce, and to regulate various body functions. The amount of nutrients such as carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, etc. present in the soil gives at any given time is referred to as the standing state. So this is the definition of standing state. Standing state is nothing but the amount of nutrients that is present in the soil at any given amount any given time. It varies in different kinds of ecosystem and is also on seasonal basis. What is more important to appreciate is that nutrients which are never lost from our ecosystem that are cycled time and again indefinitely. The movement of nutrient elements through various components of an ecosystem is known as nutrient cycle. So this is a definition of nutrient cycle. The nutrient cycle is nothing but the movement of the nutrient elements through various components of the ecosystem. Another name of the nutrient cycle is biogeochemical cycle. This is because it flows, the cycle is through bio, that is living organism, geo, that is rocks, air, water, etc. The nutrient cycle is divided into two. It's of two types. One is gaseous nutrient cycle, second is sedimentary nutrient cycle. The division is based on the reservoir of the nutrient cycle. The reservoir for gaseous type of nutrient cycle exists in the atmosphere, while the sedimentary cycle, the reservoir is located on the earth's surface. For gaseous type, the reservoir is atmosphere. For sedimentary type, the reservoir is on the earth crust. Environmental factors such as soil, moisture, pH, temperature, etc. also regulate the release of nutrient into the atmosphere. The function of the reservoir is to meet with deficit which occurs due to imbalance in the rate of influx and efflux. The example of gaseous type of nutrient cycle is nitrogen and carbon cycle, while example of sedimentary type is sulfur and phosphorus. Moving on, let's discuss more about the carbon cycle. When you study the composition of living organism, carbon constitute 49% of dry weight of organism and is next to only water. If we look at the total quantity of global carbon, we find that 71% of carbon is found dissolved in oceans. This oceanic reservoir regulate the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Fossil fuel also represent a reservoir of carbon. Carbon cycling occur through atmosphere, ocean and through living and dead organism. According to the estimate, 4 into 10 raised to 13 kilogram. So this is raised to 4 into 10 raised to 13 kilogram of carbon is fixed in the atmosphere through photosynthesis annually. A considerable amount of carbon returns to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide through respiratory activities of producers and consumers. Decomposers also contribute substantially to carbon dioxide pool by their processing of waste materials and dead organic matter of land or oceans. Some amount of fixed carbon is lost to sediments and removed from circulation also. Burning of wood, forest fire and combustion of organic matter, fossil fuel, volcanic activity are human activities have significantly influenced the carbon cycle. Rapid deforestation and massive burning of fossil fuel for energy and transport have significantly increased the rate of release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now let's see how a phosphorus cycle is happening in the ecosystem. Phosphorus is a major constituent of biological membranes, nucleic acid and cellular energy transfer system. Many animals also need large quantities of this element to make shells, bones and teeth. The natural reservoir of phosphorus is rock, which contains phosphorus in the form of phosphates. That's why we have seen it's called a sedimentary cycle. When rocks are weathered, minute amounts of these phosphates dissolve in soil solution and are absorbed by the roots of the plants. Herbivores and other animals obtain this element from plants. The waste products and the dead organisms are decomposed by phosphate solubilizing bacteria releasing the phosphorus. Unlike carbon cycle, there is no respiratory release of phosphorus into the atmosphere. So this is a difference between carbon and phosphorus cycle. And the other two major important differences between carbon and phosphorus cycle are, firstly, atmospheric input of phosphorus through rainfall are much smaller than the carbon inputs. Secondly, gaseous exchanges of phosphorus between organism and environment are negligible. So this is a simplified diagram of phosphorus cycle in a terrestrial ecosystem. We have seen that the phosphorus is very important for the living organisms. It's very important to make for, it's a major constituent of biological membrane, nucleic acid and cellular energy transfer mechanisms. Organism also need it for making our bones, shells and teeth. The natural reservoir is rock. That's why we have seen it's a sedimentary cycle, and it contains the rock in the form of phosphate. And once it is weathered, the rock, which is a reservoir, after weathering it enters the soil solution, and from the soil it is directly taken up by the producers, and from the producers it is taken up by the consumers. The plants will take it and the herbivores will eat it, and it will pass on to the consumers into various trophic levels, and once it die it becomes detritus, and then it is decomposed back to the soil by decomposers. So this is how the cycle is working, and there is some runoff. Once it is weathered and it reaches soil, some amount is lost to the surroundings, as like when it is dissolved in water or something like that. And the producers also, once they die, they become detritus and they are directly decomposed and they enter the soil solution. So this is a phosphorus cycle. Now we'll see what are ecosystem services. Healthy ecosystems are the base for a wide range of economic and environmental and aesthetic goods and services. The products of ecosystem process are named as ecosystem services. So whatever the ecosystem produces, the products are known as ecosystem services. For example, healthy forest ecosystem purify air and water, mitigate droughts and floods, cycle nutrients, generate fertile soils, provide wildlife habitat, maintain biodiversity, pollinate crops, provide storage site for carbon, and also provide aesthetic, cultural and spiritual values. So these are all examples of ecosystem services. So it purifies air and it prevents drought and floods, cycle nutrients, generate fertile soils and whatnot. Robert Constanza and his colleagues, so this is an important name, Robert Constanza and his colleague have recently tried to put price tag on nature's life support services. Researchers have put an average price tag of $33 trillion a year in these fundamental ecosystem services, which are largely taken for granted because they are free. This is twice the value of global gross national product, which is $18 trillion. Out of the total cost of various ecosystem services, the soil formation accounts for the 50%. So the most important ecosystem service and most expensive one that is provided is soil formation, which is around 50%. And the contributions of other services like recreation, nutrient cycle are only less than 10% each. The cost of climate regulation and habitat for wildlife are about 6% each. So we have seen what are ecosystem services, and when we put a price tag for each of the services that the ecosystem provide us, it's around $33. It's a rough estimate. So it's like the ecosystem is doing much more than this also. So, and now then we have seen the soil, which soil formation is the very important ecosystem service, and it accounts for 50% of the value of the ecosystem services that are provided. So that's all about this chapter. Thank you for watching. For more related contents, do like, share and subscribe.